Hello and welcome to the Selalelo program sponsored by MORE, the Movement in Omaha for Racial Equity. I'm your host, Merapelo Letebele, and the coordinator for the program, where we talk about African issues, regional integration, African unity, global racism, women's rights, equity. So today I have a guest, Mr. Eddey Mihigo.
Mihigo.
Mihigo. And he is originally from the DRC, but has been living in Botswana for the past 25 years, and he is a consultant. But I will take it over to you, Eddey, to introduce yourself better so that the people can know who you are and what you're about.
All right. Hi, everybody. And thank you so much, Merapelo, for having me. Really appreciate it. My name is Eddey Mihigo. I'm a creative consultant. So, in short, a lot of people ask me what that means. In short, what I do is I talk to people about, some issues that they might have, and then we together find creative ways of solving those issues while saving them a little bit of money. So in short, that's what I do. I work with artists a lot, artists and creatives, but of late I found that I'm getting a lot more formal businesses also asking for my assistant here and there. I'm currently attached with Mebala Youth Studios. It's basically a youth community organization. It's an NGO. And what we do is we come up with creative programs for young people to teach them soft skills and to help them just bridge the gap between, uh, you know, finishing school, being out of school, and getting some form of employment. So that's what I do in a nutshell.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
Eddie, now that you said you work with artists, everybody who's an artist or who works with artists always has dreadlocks. Is that a thing? Like, is that like the requirement?
No, not really. Not all of them. Not all of them. Some of the most famous artists on the planet are bald.
Yeah, no, I'm just being trying to be funny. But anyway, Eddie, welcome to our program. It's called Selalelo, and Selalelo is actually a Setswana name that means supper. So it's about people sitting around together having meals and having discussions. But because, of all the limitations we have in Africa, that part comes in every now and then, but not all the time. But anyway, on this program, like I stated, we talk about everything African. And the buzzword, because of what's happening, I think primarily in the United States, the buzzword is immigration. And Africa has been talking about uniting. And for a long time, it's not really happening. So now my question to you is, how would you define the kind of regional integration that everybody is talking about or dreaming of, in the Southern African context?
All right. I think in the Southern African context, I think it's happening on the ground. I think uh, our representatives and our leaders are lagging behind a little bit. We are already forming partnerships with countries in the region, and that's being in Botswana is really a blessing in that you get to really see these connections because Botswana is landlocked and it's bordered but by all of these countries. It's almost as if Botswana defines the Southern African region. And in my space, for example, in the creative space, I am in touch with pretty much creatives from Namibia, from Zambia, from Zimbabwe, and from South Africa all at the same time, you see. And all of them are kind of wanting to use Botswana as a liaison to another country. So in South Africa, for example, they want to go to the bigger markets such as Zambia, right? But they're like, no, we feel like we have to go through Botswana because it's literally on our way up there. So it's almost like a testing ground for them to continue on in their journeys. And also, one thing that has the potential to happen that is not really happening a lot is people converging in Botswana, for different reasons. I think in the past year or two, there was a push for Botswana to become like a conferencing hub, but there was also a lot of controversy around that movement. And now that the opposite has happened and things are going in a different direction, but I would say really there's a potential. I think on the ground we are already forging alliances, partnerships. We're already having people from outside coming to do business here on a one-to-one level. And I think our representatives, especially our regional body, needs to catch up and get with the program to really ensure that all of these things are formalized. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for saying that because at the core of people trying to unite, I also see that thing that Botswana is smack in the middle of Southern Africa. So, we should be that conduit, that hub, like you were saying. But we know that Botswana is one of those countries that I know for a fact, as a citizen of this country, that it is almost like anti-migration. And so, what are some of the barriers you have observed that hinder this deeper integration, between Botswana and its neighbors, for instance? Because, like you said, you collaborate with people from everywhere, so I'm sure you have better perspective than me, who's just like, single trick pony, as far as citizenship goes.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is, like you've pointed out correctly, we're a bit protectionist, and it is because of the small population. You don't want to have, even if you have like 250,000 traders from the region doing business here, it can get a little bit overwhelming. You're not sure if the system will be able to carry all of that. But I think with that also comes people wanting to assist. And I think the flaw we have is we don't really think or see that far. We think about the problem we're having now and how to prevent a, a, a worse problem basically. So we're very timid and very shy at how we approach things we don't fully understand. And of course, most of these countries are countries that might not necessarily have the best of situations. I mean, you look at South Africa, for example. You look at Zimbabwe, for example. It's like there's some preconceived ideas about these countries, and we paint all of them with one brush. So I think that those preconceived ideas and the protectionist attitude that we tend to have sometimes really stop us from really going above and going beyond what we know. And I always tell my artists when I'm working with them, I say, South Africa is 3 hours away. You know, I mean, when I mean the Johannesburg is 3 hours away, and the world is over there. There's people who are in Zambia who wish they could catch a bus, and go to Johannesburg. Windhoek the same way. If we talk about Harare, it's the same way. But you guys are the closest. You're the closest capital city. Of course, we're not counting Eswatini and Lesotho, but you're the closest capital city to Johannesburg. But you're the least people to be found there, so you really need to kind of embrace the unknown sometimes, and really jump into the pool without knowing if the water is hot or cold.
I've been observing very closely the news coming out of South Africa, where they are rounding up illegal immigrants of all kinds. Even Chinese people, I've seen them being put behind a police van and all that. There's a lot it seems like the citizens of that country are rejecting opening up that country in the way that South Africa has allowed itself to. Now, as somebody from Botswana, Botswana is also being painted as this, in glowing terms, this is the best place, a chilled place to live in or whatever, to explore opportunities, all these things. So now my question is, as somebody who came in the way that you came in, people see Botswana and South Africa as these beacons of, I guess, what do they see it as a beacon of? That thing, like success or whatever.
The Rainbow Nation, integration.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, people think that, yeah, people are always saying things like, no, Botswana is the best place to be, da da da. And we,
Mhm.
the citizens, don't see it that way. We like it, but we know that it's not what it's being pumped up to be. Now, can you just tell us your immigration journey and
Yeah.
whether you faced challenges? Somebody might be seeing all these things and thinking that it's easy to get into South Africa or Botswana. So, what sort of challenges did you face that, maybe if you speak about, it could help some people organize their thoughts and plans better?
Yeah. I'm a very interesting case because I've lived in various countries where I had to go through an immigration process. Zambia, South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Tunisia, Kenya, and even my traveling, you go through that process because the DRC visa, I mean, the DRC passport needs a visa to about 90% of the countries in the world. But I think so. Two things have happened, right? Coming to Botswana, I moved here with my parents. So I was a bit shielded in terms of the immigration process. And what we kind of appreciated was the fact that you could be covered by the person in the family who's actually employed. So when you applied under that person and you are all covered by that person. Things got a little bit tricky when I finished my varsity, my university, because now I'm an adult. Your dependent status is lost when you turn, I believe when you turn 25, when you're here. And, the university was not ready to cover me for even 3 months until the end of the year. They said, our obligation with you is done. You've got your degree. You may now deal with immigration on your own, and it was sad because I felt like, I'd been here for I think 10 years at the time. And I felt like, having given so much to the university in terms, not just in terms of, being there and paying to be there, but also really as helping put it on the map, because being a member of the fraternity and traveling and telling people that you're from there and that you value that place, I felt like the least they could do was at least, assist in ensuring that those 3 months, mind you, I had already had employment, already had a job, but from getting my results, my statement of results, to getting my degree, my actual paper degree, it will take about 3 months between June and October. And of course, in order to apply for the work permit, you needed to give those certified copy of originals. And I'm like, guys, there's I live here. My parents are here. So do you want me to get on a plane and go where? To the DRC, but where in the DRC? This is what I call home, you know? And I'm like, I'm also getting married here because I was engaged at the time. But they didn't want to help me. And and why I'm stressing that is to say that fortunately for me, I have a friend whose father was a diplomat, and he's the one who actually put in a word and said, "No, listen, I know this young man. I've met him. Please hear him out." And he told me, he said, "I've spoken to so and so person. He's one of the directors there at the immigration department. Go specifically to them, talk to them. They'll tell you what to do." Now, this is my case, right? But that's not necessarily the right way. That helped me. But imagine someone who doesn't have that person that they can rely
That's
on.
in that circle. Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, I hear you. So like now I want us to delve into the social because that's where the majority of the things happen. There's the law and this when an immigration officer is handling your situation and they tell you this is the law. There's very little room for, maneuvering. But in the social circle, that's where the xenophobia is, the racism is, anything that's undesirable happens mostly from the social circles. Now, how have you been received as somebody from Congo to living in Botswana now,
Oh,
socially?
lovely, lovely, like amazing. Like, when I arrived, I've moved around Botswana quite a bit. When I arrived, I first lived in Charles Hill. I lived in Charles Hill, the border with Namibia.
Okay.
And even there, the reception was just, people were just very warm, they were happy to show me around. And this is not me and my family. This is me specifically, just wanting to go and explore. And
It
from
has a lot-
there,
I think it has a lot to do with your personality because you're an easy person. Yeah.
yeah, it's possible. And then from there, I moved to Sewer Town. And in Sewer Town, again, I met a bunch, because Sewer Town is a mining town. And I met a lot of young people whose parents were working in the mines, who had amazing relationships with some of the young miners who were there for work. And it was a very nice hot pot of different personalities, different traditions, different cultures, and of course different countries. Me being from the DRC, and I think that kind of prepared me for Gaborone and how interesting Gaborone can be, because Gaborone is very cliquey, you know?
Yeah.
People in Habaroni have been together for 20, 25, 30 years. They've known each other since they were 2 years old, right? So I was when I moved here now where you it's easy to feel isolated and excluded and all of that. I was able to really easily, make friends and really add value and know when to speak and when to keep quiet. And because, sometimes will have a conversation about something that happened 25 years ago. And you're like,
Yeah.
well,
Am I supposed to do?
but you just keep quiet. You're like, okay, you just, you don't feel bad about it. You just keep going. And then they realize that, oh, sorry, Eddie, just, and they explain to you what's going on. And even with the language barrier, right? I think that was somewhere where, again, a lot of patience was needed, not just on my part, but on my friends' parts. And there were some of them would literally, while a joke is being cracked, someone would sit right next to me and explain the joke to me in English, just so I could be part of what was going on.
That's really nice. How old were you when you left the DRC? I know you said you went your parents lived somewhere else before. So how old?
Yeah. When I left the DRC, I was 10. And then when I left Zambia, I was 17. So I got here when I was 17 years old. So, and it's very interesting because those are very crucial parts of your life. When you're 10, it's more just making friends. When you're 17, you're now making connections and you're thinking kind of beyond just playing football in the backyard, right? And I think at that level, at that age now, I was a bit more uh, tuned into the cultural differences, and I was able to fit in quite nicely. Yeah, but Botswana has been amazing.
So like do you speak what ethnicity are you from in the DRC? Like
So, uh, in simple terms, I'm a Muswahili.
hmm?
So that is everybody that speaks Swahili. We're called Baswahili. But specifically, I'm from the Kivu region, and my parents are Bashi. They're from the tribe called Mushi. They're called Bashi, and they speak Mashi. So it's a very gibberish language.
No, not
I don't
gibberish.
speak it at all.
It's a very do you speak it? Do you speak it?
No, I don't. I don't speak it at all.
Okay. So, okay. Now, have you ever experienced xenophobia or any legal discrimination due to your nationality? Are you still are you,
Um,
are you still a DRC citizen or
yeah. I'm still a DRC citizen, 100%. So I have when I was a kid. There was, you know, kids and teasing. In Zambia, when you're from the DRC, they'll call you Mukasai, which is literally, here that call you Mkwerekwere, right? And back when you're a child, people are teasing you. You don't really make much of it, you just laugh about it until you hear as you're growing up to say, well, that's kind of derogatory, right? But at that time, you're like, well, we're just children, 10, 11, 12, having fun. I think in when I moved here, personally, I'll say personally, I didn't really suffer any any xenophobic attack or any xenophobic terms being thrown at me. But I think what hurt me a little bit was just the how comfortable some people were saying Makwere, and especially as I grew a little bit older and started catching Setswana a lot better, right? So I'd be able to sit in certain conversations, and you'd overhear people talking about you or talking about you and your friends and calling you Makwere, you're just here to do this and that, but we'd always laugh about it because we're like, well, we don't really make much of it, and most of the time you'll find someone trying to stir up some trouble, and you just move on with it. I think there was only one time where I got into a little bit of a situation with a couple of police officers, and they tried to pull that card, and I told them because they were telling me this is not the United States, it's not the movies, but I also told them I was like, this is Botswana, and in Botswana, I know my rights. I might be a resident, I know that I'm protected by the same laws that protect you. So you can't talk to me anyhow. And they backed off very quickly.
Yeah. No, apparently the police in our country don't are intimidated by people who speak English. That's the rumor on the street.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and if you're a citizen, when you speak to them in English, actually you're making them treat you worse.
And that's strange. That's strange, isn't it? That's very strange.
Yeah, they're saying, this one thinks they're better. So anyway, yeah,
You know?
we can move right along. Yeah, I think now we can talk about whether there are any Congolese products or exports, that have a market in Botswana that you've identified.
Yeah, I mean, our clothing is one. I mean, the Congolese cloth, the chitenge is it's more almost like a Southern African staple at this point. Yeah. So that's one. Of course, it would be awesome if our industry, our textile industry was back on its feet, because then you'd literally have this being worn when it's made specifically from Congo. But at the moment, for example, you can get the designs from Congo, but the actual cloth is actually manufactured in China. So that's something that needs to be fixed. But also on top of that, we have cassava leaves. Cassava leaves, the cassava crop in its own would do amazing in this country. I feel like, it would solve a lot of problems and really allow people to take ownership of their own food productions, even in their backyards. One thing Botswana has is land. And when I say land, I don't mean freehold land. I mean, like, people have houses that have massive,
Yeah.
backyards. Yeah, huge yards. So you could literally have a forest of cassava leaves and sell it to your entire neighborhood. So those are just two. There's more. There's more. There's our wildlife. Our okapi, which is a species almost like a cross between an antelope and a zebra.
Yeah.
Interestingly,
Oh,
yeah, and it's only found in the DRC. It's not found anywhere else in the world. Yeah, so yeah, so that's another thing.
okapi is not a different type of okapi.
And you know what? I always wonder, like,
Where did this come
where did
from?
that come from? But
Yeah.
yeah, those are a few things. Of course, there's our music as well. And I think
Actually,
lastly,
I think we have
there's
we have expropriated your music now. It's ours. Yeah.
well, we don't mind giving it.
Yeah. We've been loving it since I think the late 80s, 90s. That's when it really got big. Yeah. I love
I've
Congo.
got friends who I have friends who know more about Congolese music than I do.
Wow.
So embarrassing sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's circle back to the issues around immigration and stuff like that. I know that there's some, people from the DRC who are asylum seekers in Botswana, refugees and things like that. So I'm imagining that there is like a Congolese community in Botswana, right? Like where people congregate and do social stuff together, I'm sure. So do you guys interact with the ones in the refugee camp?
So yes, those who are closer do. I know that, for example, when we lived in Sewer Town, we adopted quite a few families. We took them under our wing, not necessarily them living with us, but us just making sure that they didn't want or need for anything, and if they needed to travel. We assisted them to kind of help them maybe come to Habaroni from Dukwi. And those are some of the people we're still in touch with to this day. But since moving to Habaroni, I hear that it's still happening. And now that there's an embassy, there's a DRC embassy in Botswana, they've kind of taken it upon themselves to really just check on the asylum seekers and refugees on a regular basis. And I think last year there was even an exercise where a number of them were voluntarily repatriated back to the DRC. So there is a good move and
Actually,
things happening in that regard.
you know what I wonder about? I think you heard the news last week that there have been about 200 people who were smuggled from Botswana to Britain, and people are putting in false claims for asylum and things like that, claiming that they're running away from some danger here in Botswana. And I wonder how the DRC embassy. I wish I could talk to the DRC embassy just to see how they deal with it. You know what I'm saying? Because we know that people are people. And I'm not saying anybody here has a false claim for asylum. But I wish I could really understand the issue better,
I
and
can give you my honest opinion on that,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
You know, immigration is a it's it's almost like an economy on its own
Yeah.
because that's what fuels like the cheap labor that tends to really carry some of the world's biggest economies.
Mhm.
Because whether you like it or not, the United States depends on Mexico for unskilled labor and unregistered labor. And those guys don't pay taxes. But they work, they're the hardest working, and they will do the jobs that the regular American citizens will not do. And you can say anything about South Africa, but there's a reason why South Africa, even while Zimbabwe was going through the most, they said, nah, we will not impose sanctions and we will ensure that these guys are able to travel between Zimbabwe and South Africa without even no visa, no nothing. They can just cross back and forth. There's no problem. For them also, they depend on that labor, to kind of get the economy going so that the citizens can continue being beneficiaries of the good things that are coming out of that economy. So, by that, I'm trying to say that people will always want to take advantage of that.
Mm.
You're given a little bit of an advantage and you want to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I kind of want to understand because you said your family used to help some of the people in the refugee camp. What are the conditions like?
Whew,
Have you been there?
yeah,
Have you been to the camp?
not in a long time. I think the last time I was over there might have been just before I moved to I think maybe around 2004, at somewhere there, 2004. I think that was the last time I was there. Um, I hear it's pretty, they were in the news, I think last week, and they were saying it's pretty bad, like it's pretty deplorable. They need a lot of help just to ensure that the place is a lot cleaner, and that they're well taken care of because sometimes some of the supplies take a while to get to them, and in that gap between them really needing some of these supplies and them receiving, there's nothing to carry them. So yeah, I hear it's pretty it's pretty there's worse places, but I hear it could be better.
Okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you have anything to say about what's happening in South Africa and how they are going about cleaning up their country, ridding them of illegal migrants?
That's a facade in my opinion because you know you will some of the biggest migrants you saw what happened for example with the United States where Afrikaners were ready to just up and leave. Some of the biggest migrants are the ones you cannot touch. I was talking to a friend in South Africa about this situation, and he told me, "Do you think this is happening in Cape Town?" And I said, "Probably not. I mean, Cape Town is expensive." And he's like, "No. Some of the biggest like illegal migrants in South Africa are in Cape Town." And they are all from like European countries. They just move to Cape Town on holiday and they just never leave. They get jobs at restaurants and everything, and then they're left alone. Nobody questions them.
Hmm.
And beyond, to be honest with you, it's because of the color of their skin. They fit in, perfectly. Who's going to? You've got two people sitting, both looking like they're both rich and wealthy. They're sitting at a restaurant.
Yeah,
If you stop the wrong one, it's
yeah,
a lawsuit.
yeah.
You lose your job. So they rather not do it. But with us, and just to close, I think that whole thing is it's a reaction to the anger against apartheid, right? And nobody because nobody who is was a perpetrator can be punished because of the whole reconciliation thing. They turn to the closest person they can touch. And that closest person they can touch tends to be someone who has their skin color, their neighbor, who has suffered and toiled, who's not just waiting for a handout, suffering and toiling, and has built something out of that. And it's really sad. And I really, really I know it's for the government it might be a difficult position to be in, but for me, I'm really against you're not cleaning anything. You're actually making things work for yourself. because
So,
those guys give you stuff for cheap. Mhm.
so now, do you think it will have any effect on how other Africans will move forward going forward? Do you think other people might say, okay, let us also get rid of migrants? Just like America
So
is doing it, South Africa is doing it, everybody's doing it. The Arab countries don't want Africans.
yeah, I think the reciprocation is for lack of a better word, stupid, because the environments are different. South Africa has something that happened to them that the population is traumatized by, and they're reacting to that trauma in the best way that they can.
Is
You
that the
see, it's just
message?
it's not that's what I'm saying, in the best way that they can. They react, or I won't say the worst way, because they're just trying to deal with the trauma. So it would be really disingenuous to now say, ah, as also us in Botswana, we must get rid of all foreigners. You know, you don't have any trauma. There's nothing you're reacting to. So what's the basis of that?
Okay, now let's just talk a little bit about political developments in the DRC. Um, we hear only bits and pieces and half-baked stories about what's happening with the rebel movement, the M23, and the Congolese government. What's
Yeah.
happening?
Well, in short, it's not really about the M23 movement. They're just a mercenary group being used to further someone's interests. And I am never shy to say that Paul Kagame, if something happened to him tomorrow, and I will not say God forbid, because for me personally, I'll be very honest with you. If anything happened to him tomorrow, next week that war will be done. You see,
Okay.
um, yeah. So
Do
for
you
me,
know
there's no
why?
problems there.
Do you know why South Africa was in the DRC, the South African army? What were they doing
So
there?
so SADC had sent so basically they were part of a peacekeeping mission. They'd been there for a while, okay, and they were part of a SADC military alliance to go and keep the peace in the DRC. And the idea was, at every point in time, at certain periods, a country would send more of their troops than another to kind of balance things out. So I think there's a time Mozambique had sent, there's a time I think Zimbabwe had sent, I think at a point Namibia had sent as well. So at this point, I think South Africa is the one that had sent the most troops, had the most troops there. And unfortunately for them, that's the time when the whole unrest with the M23 rebels happened. And a lot of them were only there because you're not there to fight a war. You're just there, just to make sure things are okay. And a lot of them got caught in the I don't even think they got caught in the crossfire. I think they were targeted, so that they would be pushed to actually retreat and move back to South Africa. And that's exactly what happened.
I've heard reports that some of the politically connected South Africans have mining interests in the DRC, and that's why they were there. I know the history because some years ago, maybe 20 years ago, I remember when Zimbabwe and all these countries were there. So I don't know if it's still part of that long standing uh, deal. I don't know what's going on.
No, I don't think so, because that was part of Laurent Désiré Kabila, the president after Mobutu. So he had signed some concessions with Namibia and Zimbabwe and South Africa. And the reason they had signed those concessions, those agreements, was for situations like this. Basically, part of the agreement was, if I get into any kind of trouble, please come to my aid. And I think part of the South African army being there was out of respect for that agreement. That's one. But I don't think that was the main reason. I think there was also a SADC effort to try and keep that area in check, because it's always been a very volatile area. And like I said, it's only that the South African guys are the ones that got caught out there, and they had no plan, and they didn't know what to do.
Hmm.
So it was a series of unfortunate events for them, unfortunately.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
where are the UN peacekeepers?
They're there.
So it was the UN peacekeepers and the SADC peacekeepers together.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, do you have any idea of the number of boots on the ground, for instance? In
No, no, unfortunately.
yeah,
I don't have that number. I know with the UN peacekeepers, there's quite a number of them, but they had pulled back and repatriated quite a few because there was a number of scandals that broke out in that area from women being violated to guys literally having entire families and living abandoning children in that area. So they had to pull back a bit. But I'm not sure. I can't give you exact numbers in terms of how many people are there at the moment.
yeah. The reason why I'm asking you is because I'm interested in knowing what's happening with the French. I've heard complaints about specifically the French peacekeepers and looking at how other countries, West African countries, are dealing with France. I'm just wondering if DRC is how are they faring in that regard with vis-a-vis their relationship with France.
So we don't really have a relationship with France like that. I think it's just that some of the peacekeepers just happen to be French. For us, we have a relationship more with Belgium, and that's who we try hard as we can not to deal with directly because of the unresolved trauma we have with them. So I think I think the French are just part of a bigger move in the region.
Maybe I shouldn't have said France because I guess the Belgians and the French and the Congolese people all speak French. So I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
mean, uh, but
yeah.
yeah. So do you know of any efforts whatsoever that have been at least initiated to try and talk to Belgium, for instance, to pay back in any way restitution for the horrors that they inflicted upon the Congolese people?
Well, no, I don't.
I had lost you when right after I asked you if
Yeah.
wanting some reparations.
Okay, let me start there. So I don't think our president in his head, I don't think that's a priority for him at the moment. I think he's really rather trying to get whoever, wherever, to impose sanctions on Rwanda and to condemn what's happening in the DRC. I think he's done a good job of rallying Europe in that regard. One thing I'll say that is a legacy of my family, for example, is that my maternal uncle uh, did get a written apology to the country from the king at the time. Yeah. So that's one thing that we have for now. But I think once the situation improves in the eastern side, I think that's something that we're definitely going to start exploring as we move forward.
Can you just give us an overview of the reality of the security and humanitarian situation in the DRC?
So it's a tough one, and it's really sad because it's almost like the eastern side doesn't know what's happening on the west, and the west doesn't know what's happening on the east. And for people who are from the east who live in the west, it's very scary, because at any point you might get a phone call to say, your cousin has passed on, they've been killed, right? So on the eastern side, it's hell. Just a few days ago, I saw a video of kids, students at a primary school being put through drills in case there's an army raid, right? And imagine that happens. It's commonplace in schools, and imagine a child who's 9, 10 years old having to experience that on a regular basis. I saw another video just I think yesterday of an execution that happened in public where M23 soldiers executed an innocent person. For why? Well, I don't have the facts, but what I'll say is because the situation is such that the rebel group is controlling the population and is trying to paint a narrative. If you rise up against that narrative, you're shut down very quickly and you're used as an example. So on the eastern side, it's very scary, it's very insecure. I wouldn't suggest or recommend anybody goes to that place. In Kinshasa, it's a lot better. Kinshasa is only dealing with economic hardships. But in terms of security, it's a lot better. Lubumbashi is also very good. Actually, life is a lot better. Lubumbashi in the southern part, close to Zambia there. They're doing well. They're doing good. They're actually like the trade, they're kind of like the trade hub of the country at the moment. So that's kind of like a small picture of what the DRC is looking like right now.
What do you want Africans and everybody watching, our friends, for instance, African Americans, what do you want them to understand about the conflict and the political unrest in the DRC? And before that, actually, how come we don't hear much about the other Congo?
So the other Congo is it's a dictatorial state. Sassou Nguesso was a counterpart of Mobutu, of Joseph Mobutu. Mm. So and he's president right now. So that's 100% a country that's being run via dictatorship. It's almost like North Korea. So there really is nothing much else going on there. Um, what I'll tell you has happened is Trump has actually added them to the banned list, of countries that okay, so they basically have been banned from entering the United States, and it's basically because of that. So that's why, and of course they don't have diamonds, they don't have coltan, they've got some oil, but there really isn't an urgent need for the liberators to go there and liberate them for any minerals or any other
Yeah,
commodities.
okay. So now take me back because I think I wasn't here in Africa when the split happened. What was the major cause of the Congos to split?
So that whole area, including part of Angola, was part of one kingdom, right? And of course, when two things happened, one, the settlers came, right? That's before the colonizers, the settlers came and were doing business with the different kingdoms there. And the second thing that happened was the Berlin Conference. So in the Berlin Conference, that's when now the colonizers now sat down to say, okay, based on how much business, how much trade we're doing with a certain group, right? We're going to subdivide that territory. But also, because of what we need from each other as colonizers, right? We're going to divide it in a way that there's a bit of equity. And imagine, can you imagine? And people were part of those commodities, right? They would divide the land based on equity as well to say, well, the reason you're getting this is because I need that. Because I need this, I'll give that up to you. That's literally the only basis for that separation. That's literally it. It was just trade, one, and the colonization process and the Berlin Conference, two. That's it.
Do
It's a
you know,
sad, sad, sad thing.
yeah, do you know where the majority of the Congolese, uh, the people who were enslaved from the Congo, where they ended up? Do you know where they are?
Actually, a lot of them are in the Americas. A lot of them are in the Americas. Yeah,
Yeah.
interestingly.
Okay. Yeah. Take us back and just, what do you want people to understand about the conflict, the minerals? Donald.
Yeah. So first important thing is that the Congo is the key to unlocking Africa. If the Congo is free, Africa evolves, Africa improves, Africa really becomes a power player on the global stage. Because as you know, your laptop, your camera, your cell phone, everything that has some form of a motherboard on it, that material comes from the DRC. We have the biggest reserves of that material. Your electric cars, which is the craze right now, the batteries that are used in electric cars, the mineral that is used to manufacture those batteries, or as a main ingredient to manufacturing those batteries, is made in the DRC. It's
Says
sourced in the DRC.
it.
Coltan,
Okay. Mhm.
yeah. There's coltan and there's cobalt. Those two are like really, really integral in the evolution, the technological evolution of the world as we know it. So if we're able to regulate the trade or the exportation of that raw material, naturally, we call the shots.
Who's in charge of
But
it?
right now, international mines, that mineral is mined, right? It passes through M23 and it goes to Rwanda where it's exported.
Before Rwanda started all this M23 stuff, how was it going out?
Thank you. That's a very good question. So we had an agreement, and some people will listen to this or watch this and say, "Nah, Eddie's not telling the truth." But here's what I know: we had an agreement with Rwanda. We told them, "Listen, we will allow you to legally export some of our minerals. We will look the other way and allow some of these minerals to cross to your country, and you can actually put your flag on them and export them. It's okay. Just let things be as they are." But it wasn't enough for Rwanda. So when you look at Rwanda, and you can search on it in YouTube, you'll see a lot of people, a lot of dignitaries saying that Rwanda has minerals that they're exporting that they cannot account for because they don't mine those quantities that they're claiming are legally leaving their country. So that's the reality
Why don't
of
you
the
bring it over
situation.
here? You can do it from Botswana, you know that.
Well, what one thing that's happened today is, for example, BMC has officially, restarted the beef trade with the DRC. They've sent samples, and they're gonna be, and that's the beginning of something great. So, I mean, the problem, right? The biggest problem, the biggest hurdle, is that if the powers that be decide that you're not supposed to do that, regardless of how much we want to do it, we won't be allowed to do it. That's the reality.
I know.
Yeah, we can't change that. But just one more thing. I just want to say, guys, what's happening in the DRC right now has been happening for more than 30 years. And that war, we call it the forgotten war. We call it the silent genocide because as of now, more people have died in that area than died during the Holocaust.
Wow.
And the only way things will start changing is if we talk about it. So look for pages on Instagram that are championing the cause of the Congo and of the Kivu area. There are a lot of them, and just all you have to do is just share to your stories, share with friends. And the same energy that we're applying to Palestine and to what's happening in Gaza, I really feel we need to apply to something that is not only close to home, close to us, but something that is integral for our progression as African people and as a continent.
Hmm. Yeah, well said, Eddie. I think it also has a lot to do with the fact that people don't really know what's happening. We just know that there's conflict about minerals, and people are like, okay, let them sort it out. It's a pity. That's why we have these conversations at Selalelo to say, how can we as Africans start talking about things that matter, that concern us, that can save us, and that can get us to reconcile and move forward together as a united group.
You're very right. And you'll be surprised that even the people in government departments who should know don't know.
Yeah.
I remember sitting down with a few officials from a government department, and they didn't even know the history of the Congo. Why is your country such a big deal? What is so special about it? And when I started telling them the history, they were like, "Oh my goodness." So you're telling
I think
me,
it's because you exported the music that they like, and that's all they know. They don't even, because they see Congolese people happy, they don't think that they have problems, you know.
yeah, and they don't see the connection because the connection is not just with culture. The connection is also with our borders because when they hear that King Leopold was the brain behind the scramble for Africa, and he's the one who actually owned the country we call the Congo today and its people. It makes for some. There's a lady who was like, you know what, I need you to stop because I feel like my skin is crawling right now. I'm livid just hearing what you just said. But I told her, I said, but it's the reality. You need to know your history as an African before you start making steps to make a change.
How can we ever know, Eddie? I mean, I know a lot of stuff because I used to be a journalist. So obviously, the interest was sparked inside of me to go and personally, pursue knowledge. And our education system put us in this way. It was crafted from the United Kingdom in the beginning, and they wanted us to know only certain things. So we don't even know anything about each other as Africans. That's why we have this program. We are trying to connect with as many Africans as we can, and also take it further to say, Black people, wherever they are, we would like to make connections so that we have these tribal bickering and wars and xenophobia and all these things in Africa. But at the world stage, we all get hit by the same stick of racism. Racism is more targeted at Black Africans than any other, ethnicity in the
Mm.
world. And it's like we don't see these things. Just because it's not happening in Botswana, we think that, oh, it's got nothing to do with us, unfortunately.
Very true. Very true. I think we have a potential because this is something that can really unite us. And I think the beauty is it's a movement that transcends different spaces as well, because I'm doing the same thing in the creative entertainment space. I'm really trying as hard as I can to talk to other entertainers from around the world who are who are not just African, but supporters of the African way of doing things. And I think we just need to keep talking to each other. And I think the more we talk, the more people start figuring out how we can then get things done properly.
Yeah, do invite us to some of your events, Eddie. Thank you very much for
I
this
will.
insightful, powerful conversation. And you are very calm. And people might miss all the power that you spoke just because you are very calm. But what you said was just like my mind was just going like boom, boom, boom every 2 seconds. So thank you very much. I hope to talk to you in the future about other African issues.
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to it.